Well, I would say, first of all, we are really talking about the possibility of connected vehicles that talk to each other, so to say, but are also connected to the infrastructure. And we are starting to see the first appearances of that also already today here very much at this fantastic exhibition. But also even things that will be on the road very soon, like the e-call, being the emergency alert system, as a beginning of that. But there's certainly a lot more that will come, where you can kind of use the connection between the vehicles in order to do, for example, better traffic management, use less energy, less congestion, or also this interaction between the vehicle and the infrastructure to look at, let's say, larger systems, for example, in cities, how traffic moves around. Smarter cities for us are in the end really cities in which it is better for citizens to live and where you can find better jobs and more opportunities for culture and for mobility also. So smarter cities is a way of thinking about better living in cities, and we think that actually Europe has a lot to offer there. Now, smarter cities are for sure based upon using technology and using information technology, and in first instance we see the main opportunities in the combination between information technology, transport and mobility, and energy. So for example, to have safer transport that uses less energy, is greener, is faster, is producing less congestion, so improved mobility. That's one of the ways that actually hopefully everybody will appreciate to live in a smart city. But also a smart city then as a demonstration of how you can use this kind of combination of technological developments and of better ways of organizing, let's say, for example, mobility and traffic in a city in Europe as something that we can showcase internationally, because our cities are anyway places in the world that many would perceive as, well, it's good to live in a European city, and good solutions will also sell internationally. One of the ways where we can play a role is to help that we have roadmaps that we all adhere to. So ways of developing and ways of deploying that move the field faster forward. It is going at a relatively high pace. That's good already. So we have a good track record in Europe to put in place, let's say, more advanced solutions, for example, for safety, as we see in many of the cars today, and there are many new solutions coming into place, like indeed also shown here. But what we need is that we have a good understanding of where do we want to move to, and what does it mean in terms of investments, in terms of critical issues such as if you have vehicles that talk to each other or vehicles that talk to the infrastructure. This has to be available everywhere in Europe, so that means interoperability, systems that can talk to each other, and that means also standards. So we also need to have roadmaps for standards, roadmaps for investment, roadmaps for research and development. The Commission plays certainly a role. We provide, as Europe, and the European Commission helps to provide that, a lot of funding for research and innovation. That is under the new program, Horizon 2020. We also give mandates to standardization organizations to put in place those standards that are necessary in Europe. And we help also to negotiate these internationally, because global standards actually will bring everybody more benefits. So there's a number of elements in which the Commission can play a role. The Commission also has a responsibility as policymakers to look into what does it mean in legislative terms. Are there certain barriers that need to be resolved or need to be addressed? So there's a set of rules where the Commission very much in interplay with the key players in the field, and that really goes from citizens, cities, to manufacturers, suppliers, to develop a sensible policy. First of all, we have to be realistic about these concerns. They are there and we have to recognize them. Addressing them is actually having a lot of added value, because if you have got a good story about how you deal with personal data, also when they are coming from a vehicle, and that it has benefits but can also be under control of the user in an understandable way, we actually have something that makes a lot of sense and people will go for that. Now, Europe is pretty strong in data protection, and that's very good that just recently we had a vote in the European Parliament on the new data protection regulation, the revision of that, and that moves that critical piece of legislation a step forward. It still needs to be completed in the full legislative process between Council and European Parliament. It will still take a bit of time. But that is giving us the framing and the guidance to work in a sensible way with privacy, with personal data. That's one aspect. And it will be important for the sector to also clarify how the legislation is going to be used in practice. Certainly, as technology continues to develop, so there will be new questions coming up, and the answer should be found using legislation and using the best practices that people put in place. Those best practices definitely have to involve the citizens and the users a lot, because it's meeting their concerns. The liability question is another important one, where again progress is being made. It's also one of the issues that needs to be clarified. We have also a comprehensive study running to map out all the liability issues. It sounds like a concern, and it should be a concern, but at the same time it's a normal aspect of actually kind of any type of innovation when it's put in place. How are we using that? Whether it's in mobility, whether it's in health, whether any kind of other area where we see such innovations coming up, we will have to address liability. So I would say it's a normal part of business. Resolving that will actually mean to people we have solutions in place that have addressed all of these specific issues: data protection, liability, security, to mention another issue. Cybersecurity will also become important for the mobility sector, and we have to address all of those. That's just part of doing a good policy making and doing good business. We are pursuing very much a path to promote the availability of open standards, interoperability being a possibility to offer more choice to consumers and to manufacturers, in fact also to put together solutions that come from several suppliers and give the options for consumers to say this is what I like and what I may want to use, and actually it also generates economies of scale. So an important aspect in that is to move towards open standards and have standards widely agreed. Open data is another debate that comes up very much, where we see the great potential if data are being made available. Again, you need to do that under conditions that are reasonable from a point of view of data protection, which is a right which you cannot violate, that also allow for responsible use, which brings it a little bit back to the question of liability, and also generates many of these business opportunities, because there are many business opportunities, for example, from data analytics. So we see a whole area of innovation opening up, for which certainly some of the rules still need to be clarified. And we are also working on a further policy in the field of open data and the exploitation, so to say, of the data value chain. So it's one of those areas, and certainly the mobility sector is not the only sector. We also see that in other sectors of the economy, where we would all benefit a lot when we take a proactive approach to open data and to open standards.